Spavor was one of two Canadians detained for years by China after Canada arrested a Chinese tech executive on behalf of the United States.
This is not the type of thing that any government wants to see made public.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, also known as the two Michaels, were held prisoner by China for over 1,000 days. It was announced in November that Spavor had launched a lawsuit against Trudeau's government and was in talks to be compensated for Trudeau's incompetence. Well, it seems that finally someone is seeing at least some justice served from the Liberals.
Let's take a look.
Michael Spavor says the matter between his client and the federal government has been resolved. He didn't provide any other details, but there are reports of a multi-million-dollar settlement agreement. Spavor was one of two Canadians detained for years by China after Canada arrested a Chinese tech executive on behalf of the United States. Joining me now to discuss is Tom Mulcair, CTV's political commentator and the former leader of the NDP. Good morning to you, Tom. Good to see you.
Good to be with you, Marcia.
So what's your reaction to Michael Spavor reaching a multi-million-dollar settlement with the federal government? And for our viewers who might be wondering why, is that a question that can be answered?
I think you were right in your introduction. We're not going to have enough information to provide a full answer to that anytime soon because, of course, there will be non-disclosure agreements in this. There's a lid being kept on it. The day Michael Spavor came forward just a few months ago and said, look, this was a mess. I was taken into custody and held for years in China as a result of actions of the Canadian government. And he was opening up the door to blowing the whistle on all of that. I wasn't surprised to see that lid be put on top of it rather quickly because, of course, this is not the type of thing that any government wants to see made public. And so there are secrets involved in this that are probably going to remain secret. You're right also to refer to the arrest and detention of, well, on behalf of the Americans, of Wang Mengzhou. She was held under house arrest, but she was held for a long time as well. She was the heir to the Huawei, one of the largest companies in China, and it was a real mess that only got solved finally when Joe Biden came to power.
Many mainstream news outlets reported on this. Here's an excerpt from CTV News. Michael Spavor, one of two Canadians imprisoned for nearly 3 years in China, has resolved a legal matter with the Canadian government, his lawyer confirmed Wednesday. The Globe and Mail first reported that a settlement had been reached. Quote, I apologize, but I am only able to say that the matter between Mr. Spavor and the Government of Canada has been resolved, end quote, reads an emailed response to CTV News from John K. Phillips, a lawyer for Spavor. The resolution of this matter comes more than 2 years after Spavor and fellow Canadian Michael Kovrig, together dubbed the Two Michaels, were released from Chinese custody in September 2021. Their return to Canada marked the end of a lengthy overseas imprisonment that began in December 2018, following the attempted extradition up to the United States from Canada of Meng Wanzhou, chief financial officer of Chinese tech giant Huawei. Spavor was arrested for alleged espionage, a charge the Government of Canada has denied, describing his and Kovrig's detention as unjust and arbitrary. The men were released the same day that the U.S. Justice Department reached a deal to resolve charges against Meng. Last year, the Globe and Mail reported that Spavor was seeking a multi-million-dollar settlement from the Canadian government, citing unnamed sources. In an update Wednesday, the Globe reported that Spavor's settlement is worth, quote, about $6 million, end quote.
Ottawa on Wednesday reached a settlement with a Canadian who was jailed in China for nearly 3 years and claimed he had been unwittingly used for intelligence gathering. Canadians Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig were detained by Beijing in December 2018 in apparent retaliation for the arrest in Vancouver of Meng Wanzhou, the chief financial officer of Chinese telecoms equipment giant Huawei Technologies Corporate Limited, on a U.S. warrant. After all three of them were freed in September 2021, Spavor blamed Kovrig for his detention. Spavor, a businessman with connections to high-ranking members of the North Korean government, said he was arrested by China because he passed along information to Kovrig, who then passed that information on to the Canadian government, unbeknownst to Spavor. Canadian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Charlotte McLeod said Wednesday that the government, quote, is committed to supporting the two Michaels in their efforts to return to a new chapter in their lives based on their individual circumstances and impacts, and in acknowledgement of their ordeal and the suffering caused by their arbitrary detention by China, end quote. Spavor's lawyer, John Phillips, said simply that the matter has been resolved. China says Canada is distorting facts over jailing of the two Michaels. No details were provided, but the Globe and Mail newspaper, citing unnamed sources, reported that the Canadian government agreed to pay Spavor $7 million. Kovrig, who previously acknowledged to the Globe and Mail that he was in talks with Canada's government over compensation, didn't immediately respond to a message-seeking comment. At the time of their detention, Ottawa rejected spying charges leveled against the two Michaels. So, here's the thing, folks. We've covered the two Michaels before, but for those that don't know, they went through quite the ordeal over in China, and there were talks that they were about to be released. And this is where the allegations from the CSIS whistleblowers come into play, where they released some intelligence to some of the mainstream media outlets alleging that Han Dong met with a Chinese ambassador and asked them to hold on to the two Michaels just a little bit longer because it would benefit the Liberals in order for that to happen.
Now, MP Han Dong was a Liberal at the time. He's now sitting as an independent because when all this came out, he resigned from caucus. He still maintains his seat. He's still in the House of Commons, but he's not a Liberal Party member anymore.
And when all these allegations first came out, that's when you heard Justin Trudeau calling everybody a racist. You know, this is what's going on. Now, Han Dong has gone on to say that he is, trying to sue Global News because they're the ones that actually released the story at the time. But Global News has said that they stand by the reporting. Now, the interesting thing here is the $7 million that Michael Spavor is actually getting, that's actually taxpayer money.
Right, because the government doesn't have money of its own. And this is where it gets kind of tricky because, just on a personal level, I feel very, very bad for both Michaels and the horror that they had to endure. And it is our government's fault. But again, it's taxpayer money. I think the people that I'm really mad at are the government, Trudeau and his ministers. Like, they just made such a mess of this. And then there's allegations that Han Dong kept them in jail even longer, or encouraged the Chinese jailers to keep them in jail even longer is the accurate way to say it. I'm just so mad at the government for this entire debacle. Those two poor men should not have been in jail in the first place. They shouldn't have been kept there longer, and Canadians should not be footing the bill for the government's incompetence.
Well, and some of you may be saying, well, what was this stuff about Spavor accusing Kovrig of being the reason that they were arrested? Here's the thing, Kovrig is a diplomat, and CSIS doesn't have any, international espionage operations. What Canada does is they just get passive intelligence from their diplomats that are around the world, and this is not. It's not considered espionage because they're not stealing secrets. They're just observing and reporting back what they find. Just as anyone goes to another country, you're not spying. You're taking pictures of monuments and you're talking to the locals, and then you're coming back and you're telling everybody about your experiences. That's kind of what the diplomats are doing, and so obviously the government asked Kovrig to talk to Spavor about that, and Kovrig did that. So you can't really blame the diplomat for carrying out his orders of what he was asked to do by the government. What you can do is blame the government for completely botching this whole thing. And, this is the thing. And then Justin Trudeau wanted to be hailed a hero when they got home. You actually had to wait for Joe Biden of all guys, to come into power to actually fix this mess for you. And the reason why... the reason how this got all resolved is, so originally, the United States had a warrant for the Huawei princess's arrest. That's why Canada arrested her. And it sounded like what Justin Trudeau was doing was begging Joe Biden to just drop the arrest. And eventually, Biden did.
And surprise, surprise, the two Michaels were released the exact same day.
Even though the Liberal government would have you believe one had nothing to do with the other.
Oh, of course.
And it was all their doing, right? So here's the thing. When Joe Biden did that, he actually gave a bit of a finger wag to Trudeau saying, yeah, we're going to drop this warrant, but understand, you guys can't trust China. Like, this was Joe Biden telling this to Trudeau and the Liberal government. You can't trust China. They're not to be trifled with, and they're bad news. So my guess is the Attorney General for the United States was absolutely pissed that they actually had to drop these charges. Because here's the thing. Huawei was found to have a lot of underhanded spyware integrated into their phones. That's why nobody will carry their phones anymore in North America. And they've been banned in many, many countries. Google will not release any updates for any of the Huawei phones. So they actually had a lot to answer for. But they had to give her up because Trudeau couldn't do his job and get his own citizens back. So it's just a complete joke. But you know, even though it's taxpayer money, I have to say, at least somebody is getting justice out of this Liberal government. It's just unfortunate that the Canadian taxpayer is on the hook for it.
Right, but we shouldn't be mad at the two Michaels. We need to be mad at our government for bungling this from the beginning.
Absolutely. So this is another notch on the Trudeau government. We're not going to hear anything associated with this. You know, why, what happened, anything like that. There will be NDAs all over the place. They won't be able to say anything. But this is just one more step in the right direction, folks, to this government falling, because justice is finally starting to be served.